Welcome to Behind the Ballot. We are live in studio with the Mayoral Debate, so we're really pleased you could join us here on YourTV. I'm Jay Amer, and before we get started, I just want to go over our ground rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. We held a draw earlier today, overseen by our station manager, David Feely, today, and Daryl Bennett is our first candidate. He will speak first in the opening statements, and Diane Therrien will go second. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer each question. We have a little dinger here in the background that gives a 15-minute 15 seconds, sorry, I don't want to get you too excited.
Thank you.
15-second notification. And we'll have a latch gate format. Even though we only have 2 candidates, if one candidate mentions the other, the candidate that was mentioned will have a chance to rebut anything that was said. And we have a new feature this year on our Behind the Ballot coverage. Sometime during our hour-and-a-half long debate, each candidate will be given the opportunity to ask a direct question of the other candidate, and we'll look forward to that as we get started. We will end off with a final 2-minute remarks in reverse order of the opening statement, and those final statements will be no longer than 2 minutes. So let's get started. And first of all, I want to welcome both Diane Therrien and Daryl Bennett to our studios. It's been a long trail. I think the last time I had you guys on Behind the Ballot, it was going on about how long, hot summer. It continues into the fall. So
it's still summer.
It doesn't go away. Yeah.
No. So and again, we can't complain. We'll just remember what it'll be like in February here in Peterborough. So we'll get down and start off with opening statements. As mentioned earlier, we did a draw, and Daryl Bennett was the person that will give their first 2-minute opening statement. So Daryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Jay, and certainly thanks to Cogeco this evening for hosting this event and for being part of our community. Together, we are building a better community to support jobs and the quality of life that we've come to be familiar with in this area. We stand shoulder to shoulder in the common cause of building together. When you look around the community, you see progress everywhere. 2,800 new houses approved in the north end of the city of Peterborough. Peterborough Airport with its $30 million Flying Colours investment. Coke and Minimade, $85 million investment. The Clean Tech Commons Business Park at Trent University. The Innovation Cluster downtown. The rebuilding of Lansdowne Street, Ashburn and Brayley Drive. The rebuilding of the Bethune Street flood-prone corridor, which is going to assist a lot of the business and housing development in the downtown, creating hundreds of affordable housing units in and around our community, maintaining social services even when the government, provincial government made some cutbacks. We do this while respecting our taxpayer, and that's you. We are operating on average at a 2% operational budget increase. We add to that a 1% for capital expenditures, which is well below our provincial average. But there's a lot more to be done. There's always more to be done. More units for the Peterborough Housing Corporation, completing the Brock mission, more work on the roads in a community, conversation about the aging Memorial Centre. We listen to everyone and show leadership by making decisions that support prosperity. I'm very pleased to support growth and momentum. Working together, we will continue to make a positive difference in our community.
Great. Thank you, Daryl. And now we'll go to Diane Therrien for her opening statement.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you to YourTV Cogeco for hosting us here tonight, and to everyone watching. So my name is Diane Therrien. I've been on City Council representing Ward 3 since 2014. I got involved in municipal politics because when I really started paying attention to what was happening at City Council, I thought that there were voices and perspectives that were missing around the table, and that we needed more diversity around there to be truly representative of the community that we are and the change that is happening every day. I love municipal politics because it's the most tangible level of government. It gives me the opportunity to make changes in the city and improve the quality of life in residents' day-to-day lives. Outside of municipal politics, I have experience in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. I understand how those work together, as well as how the municipality works with them and how various levels of government intersect with each other. I also understand the day-to-day realities facing businesses, employers, and residents in our community, and I work hard to ensure City Council makes decisions that are financially responsible and beneficial for all. We expect more from our elected leaders. more transparency and more consultation, more careful planning, and more empathy towards the many different stories that play out each and every day in this city. We expect more from the people who ask for our vote. And myself, like many others that I have met at the door, have chosen to build our lives here because of all that Peterborough has to offer. The friendly nature and sense of community, the proximity to trails and green space, the vibrant arts and culture. But again, there are areas that we need to improve on, in particular, housing, employment, and infrastructure. We need forward-thinking and innovative approaches to dealing with these issues. And I know that our city is growing. I encourage that. But again, I do not support growth at all costs. We need a modern and updated official plan that will help guide our city forward, and we need leadership who are able to work collaboratively with all sectors, all levels of government, and all stakeholders in this place we call home.
Great, thank you very much, and I'm very impressed. Right on time for both candidates. We're off to a good start.
We are too.
Let me start off with a question, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of the topics that came up in your opening statements. But one that's quite visible, and it's top of mind for a lot of people in Peterborough, has to do with poverty and homelessness. And I've got some questions I want to ask there. And Daryl, I'm going to go to you first. Peterborough continues to see an increase in homelessness and the need for facilities providing shelter and food for its citizens. What immediate action by the City of Peterborough do you support to help alleviate this problem, and what is your long-term solution?
Well, let's start with the long-term solution. Good question. It's one that gets asked quite regularly, quite frankly. The long-term solution is to come up with a national housing strategy that needs federal funding and needs assistance from the upper level of government to make sure that we can sustain that. Anything that we do locally is built on the back of the property taxpayer in the City of Peterborough, and I get chastised on occasion from some where I say we are not in the redistribution of wealth business. That means that we don't have income taxes to work with. We work with property taxes, and those are something that some people get in trouble themselves when we start to fool around and add on numbers to it. From a homelessness standpoint, every community in this country deals with problems that relate to homelessness and poverty, some worse than others. We seem to have an abundance of people who are in need in this community. We continue to act appropriately to give the best services that we possibly can without stepping out of bounds. And when I say that, we do not want to get ourselves outside the curve that's going on in this province right now. With our discretionary benefits, we're at the full max with those as far as I'm concerned. We've done our best on housing. We've added, when I was first elected in 2010, we had a waiting list of 1,594 people looking for affordable housing. We've added upwards of 800 units of affordable housing. We now have a waiting list of 1,600 people. So we're attracting people to the community who are looking for housing because they're not getting in other areas. That's where the National Housing Strategy comes in, and that's something that I'm very, very proactive on. It's something that we cannot let up on until we get it.
Thank you, Daryl. Diane, the same question for you. What immediate action by the City of Peterborough do you support to help alleviate this problem, and what is your long-term solution?
Absolutely. And so I worked for several years with the Peterborough Poverty Reduction Network, and so I understand deeply the challenges that are faced in this community, and poverty and housing insecurity are interrelated. And we know that we have a high proportion of people who are in core housing need. And what we're seeing, aside from homelessness, is also increasing amounts of working people who are no longer able to afford their property taxes or their rent increases. Rent in this town has gone up astronomically, and people cannot afford that. And so we need to be working, along with affordable housing, we need to be working with developers. When we're putting in new developments, we need to be talking about inclusionary zoning, about mixed use, mixed density, so that you have single family homes, you have some townhomes, and you also have some apartment buildings for seniors who are looking to downsize, for students who are coming here with nowhere to live, for young families who are trying to get a start in the housing market, who can't because they're getting outbid from people coming from the GTA and from the Durham region. So those are issues that we're dealing with. We do need to work with senior levels of government. They've talked about mental health and they've talked about housing, but there hasn't been a lot of money flowing for that. And those are some of the drivers of poverty that we see today. But again, when we talk about poverty, there are a lot of people in this community that are working and they're still in poverty. And that's partly because wages have not gone up. People are working, full-time and can still and not afford their rent and to feed their families, and that's a problem. So it's going to take a comprehensive approach between the municipality, between all the various nonprofits that do work on that issue, as well as lobbying the senior levels of government to actually put their money where their mouth is when they're talking about that, because people in our community are hurting every day and it's getting worse.
Okay, Diana, I'm going to, other questions related, and I think you touched on it, and then we'll go to Daryl for his direct reply. Should affordable multi-unit housing be included in any new housing development that's approved in the city of Peterborough?
Yes. I believe so. I believe that when you're planning and when we're doing best practices for planning moving forward, you need to have a diversity of housing. And that's the way that other municipalities are doing it. When we're building also, for example, new strip malls, new storefronts, there is no reason why we shouldn't be mandating to build apartment units above those. It's done in multiple other jurisdictions so that you're making better use of the land space that you have there and that you are taking some of the pressure off of our 1% vacancy rate that we have in this community. And so we need to be looking at innovative ways to try to house people, and we need to be looking to other jurisdictions and municipalities to see what they're doing, because it has worked in other places. And so we don't necessarily need to be the ones that are the pilot project on these things. There's a lot of examples of things that have worked in other places, and we need to be adapting that to our Peterborough context to help the people that are here now. There's a lot of people that are paying more than 50% of their rent towards housing. And that's not a sustainable way to live.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. Daryl, we'll go over to you to expand on that. Should affordable housing be included in new housing development?
And that's something that we have talked about and continue to talk about. We work very carefully to ensure that we're not putting undue pressures on the taxpayer in the city of Peterborough. Ultimately, the costs that are incurred by a developer are passed along to the customer. And the customer in this case happens to end up to be the taxpayer in the community. So you need to be very cautious in your approach to doing that. Yes, it's appropriate because a lot of jurisdictions are putting apartments above commercial space now, and they're actually turning in some of their mall activities has been converted to residential use as well as commercial use, and that's all well and good, and it's very effective actually, and it's essentially effective when the private sector does it. We have plans on intensification through places to go. It's dictating the stylization of units that are placed in various areas by way of intensification. Again, though, you need to be very cautious about the costing side of it. Somebody has to pay the bill, and if you don't put it on to the overall property side of it, then those who are buying into the market are going to end up paying for somebody else's property. So it's something that we're keen on, it's something that we're working on, but we need to work very carefully on it. It comes right back to that federal housing strategy on affordability of housing, and that's something that once there's funds available to us, then we can have something to work with to assist those most in need without burdening those who are paying the bill as we speak.
Daryl, I've got one more question on this topic, and let me do a follow-up to that does relate to your answer, and then we'll go over to Diane. What city programs would you support or introduce to create affordable housing once that national housing strategy is in place? What would be your priority? What do you think would work best for the city of Peterborough?
We already have programs in place that assist certain areas of the city of Peterborough, and certainly we're looking at expanding those through our official planning process. So the SIP program that we have enhances downtown activities, and we can apply that in different other regions of the city as well. That's a very effective way of encouraging builders to come in and do new innovative projects without burdening the taxpayer. That's land and/or buildings that would not generate any additional tax revenue unless some program was put in place, so the recovery process is sound. We make an investment on behalf of the taxpayer by not charging new taxes on the newly developed areas until such time as they're built, up and running, and we give the developer a few years to recover some of their costs in doing that, and then we kick in on the program. So it's very effective. It works very well. We have not had a big uptake on it downtown because there's not that many properties that have been identified just yet to work on, but they're coming, and they're coming fast.
Thank you, Daryl. Diane, same question to you. What programs, assuming there is funding from the National Housing Strategy, what would be your priorities to create affordable housing using those funds?
And there are funds available. The co-investment fund has been open since May, and so we need to be working on innovative ways to house people. And like I said, there are examples in other jurisdictions of people who have worked on bringing in smaller homes, bringing in smaller units where you have maybe 3 floors and you have a couple apartments in there for people. So we need to be looking at doing that not just in the downtown area, but also in areas where we've gone through our official plan process, where we're talking about building up on our commercial nodes. Those are perfect examples of places to put in such type of housing because it's close to commercial, it's close to transit, it's close to all the amenities that people need, and they don't necessarily need to have a car to get there. We also need to be working with new subdivisions when they're being proposed to say that we cannot afford to only have single family homes going in. Those are not, first of all, they're not economically feasible for most people in our community if they're starting at $400,000 or $500,000. And then we also need to make sure that they are building in townhouses, building in apartment buildings. And again, I'm not talking 20 stories, I'm talking 3 to 5 story mixed use development. That's the way to go forward, because then you also get the return on your investment, because we know that it costs more to service those new subdivisions in the long term than we get from development charges or from property taxes, to clear the snow, to maintain the water and the sidewalks and all of those things. So we need to be looking at it in a holistic way, and what people are looking for. And there is a demand for some smaller housing, seniors who want to downsize but currently have nowhere to go, for students who are moving here but can't get a spot in residence and then are driving this 1% vacancy rate, and some of them are living in hotels or cars or U-Hauls, I've heard, and that's not acceptable either. So we need to be working with our different partners in town to make sure that we can alleviate this problem.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Diane, we'll stick with you. I'm going to shift topics right now. The last time we held a debate in the studio was in the fall, it was in the spring. It was for the provincial election. We're 100 days into a new government for the province of Ontario. The province of Ontario oversees municipal government. They fund them, they set the rules on how they can behave. What would be your approach to working with the provincial government if you were elected mayor?
Well, I am a collaborative person and I work well with anyone. And so I have met with MPP Smith on a few issues so far, and we continue to do that, and happy to keep those conversations open to talk about a variety of issues that are going to be impacting this community, particularly around legalization of cannabis, which is coming forward, which is going to be a big issue, as well around mental health and healthcare, which we know are also big issues in this community. So we hear a lot about the problems downtown and the problems with substance abuse, and the province has talked about mental health and the opioids crisis, but they haven't actually put any money into that yet. So we need to be working to put pressure on them to help municipalities deal with the issues that are happening in our communities. And with the legalization of cannabis, that's also going to be something that we have to deal with the fallout from. And so we need to see more money than what they've originally proposed to give to municipalities. But open lines of communication and clear dialogue are important to me, no matter who is in power.
Okay. Thanks, Diane, and we will talk a bit about that other subject a little later on. Under
the C word?
Yeah. Yes, or the M word. We'll do that under smoking. Darryl, what would be your approach as mayor if re-elected to work with the provincial government?
To continue to work as I have in the past. Our former MPP, Jeff Leal, was a great collaborator for our community, did a lot of good work for our community. Dave Smith has picked up that glove and is running with it rather nicely, as well as our other 2 members as well. Dave down in the east and Laurie in the west are all good people to work with. I reached out to all of them after the election and congratulated them, number one, and then said we have a few issues we need to talk about, and we started that process immediately. So we've had 3 meetings with Dave Smith at this point, all of them very beneficial from a community standpoint. He understands a lot of the issues that we are aware of, and he is certainly going to assist as he can to alleviate some of the difficulties that we pointed out to him. The cannabis issue, we look forward to that discussion going forward. It's coming up next week. October 17th is C-Day, and that'll be one that we need to get lots of guidance on before the provincial government turns it loose on the communities. They're doing it by the mail services initially, and that's something that we can get a little bit of time to take advantage of. Operationally speaking, a number of the programs that we deal with are controlled by the provincial government, so we need a very strong working relationship with them. I would like to think that I have a very good lead on doing that because I know the players quite well.
Okay, thank you both. Now, I'm going to ask a question, and it's got 2 parts to it, but I'm going to go to Darryl to start, and this continues along the provincial theme. And there's two-parter. What policy of the new provincial government do you most like and why? And what policy of the provincial government are you not really on board with at this point? Now, there's been a whole bunch of changes. I'm going to talk a little bit to give you some time to think about that. But Darryl, what policy of the provincial government has struck you as something that you can really support, if any?
Well, the interesting part of the new provincial government is that they started to act rather quickly on a number of matters that were incidental to some folks in the communities, and some folks took them very seriously. I think the province will find itself in the need of moving to a little bit better strategy on dealing with things and get away from that ready, fire, aim mentality to a ready, aim, fire mentality. Everything that they have on their plate was stuff that was there from before. The big problems that are going to be facing all of us is that covered as bare scenario that's been promised to us. It's been analyzed thus far, and it's going to come out with further difficulties from an operational standpoint. So Mr. Ford has indicated that he's going to be very frugal in his spending of taxpayer dollars from a provincial standpoint, which directly impacts municipalities, and that's something that we need to be very cautionary about. I think that from a financial fiscal standpoint, we will rely on that to give us some guidance going forward. The comments have been made that we are going to be in need of taking care of our own needs with projects going forward, and that's something that we have the ability to continue doing because we've done a lot of that in the past, quite frankly. So from a policy standpoint, their fiscal stances that they're taking, some of the legal changes that they're making to some of the requirements that are going to fall down to the municipal level are very important to us. Some of the ones that are going to directly impact those of us who work with the provincial government by way of funding applications and things of that nature are going to be impacted in a positive way, I believe, but time will tell on it.
Thank you, Darryl. And Diane, anything you support that the provincial government has come out with? Is there anything you have concerns about?
I do have concerns with some of the policies that they've rolled back under the guise of more consultation, but rolling them back without any consultation. So in particular, the basic income guarantee pilot project that was scheduled to wrap up next year has had a negative impact on a lot of people in our neighborhood community of Lindsay. As well, we know that the health and physical education curriculum rollback has had quite an impact on a lot of the students that are in there now, and that was something that that the previous government did put a lot of consultation into, and so that's going to cost us money in the long term to try to bring that up to the standard that they're looking for, and I think that wasn't necessarily the best use of funds and the best use of goodwill on part of the public.
Thank you, Diane. We've got one more question before our first break. We're almost there, and everybody's done a great job so far. Thank you. We're moving along nicely. I don't think I'll run out of questions, but I want to keep on moving. I do have to ask, it's a question about this topic. It's kind of related to the government. It was overseen by the government. This has to do with the casino. Shoreline's Casino is opening any day now.
Monday, I heard.
Okay, there you got some inside scoops from the candidates. It's moved into the city limits of Peterborough, and what that means is, and Diane, this question's for you, first off, will potentially direct and contribute several $1 million annually to municipal revenues. The casino's here, the revenues are going to come in. Where do you think those revenues should be directed?
Well, as you know, we have a whole host of issues that we need to be looking at. The state of our infrastructure, the state of our housing stock, the state of some of the parks that we have that we need to maintain. We want to invest some of that money so that we have it when we need to pull on it later. So I think having a fair and balanced approach to spending but also investing it is what we need to be doing. Because it's easy when you get those big paychecks to spend it all on big projects. But I want to be prudent about how we use that and make sure that we're using it on the projects that are of top priority for the entire community.
Okay. And Darryl, same question to you. Where do you see the new funds going from the casino?
We've had some preliminary discussions both with council and with staff, and we decided that we would use all of the funds that are coming in from the casino for capital projects. As you know, in the community, in this year we had $1.98 billion of outstanding capital projects, which is a large number, but it's not a number that we're not unlikely to see diminished in a great way in the short term. We run about $80 to $85 million worth of projects on an annualized basis from a capital standpoint. This money can either be used to enhance some of those capital projects, to move them up a little bit quicker, a little bit further, some of the more emergency related ones, and or reduce the capital costs of your actual property taxes. So that's a debate that we're going to have, and it's a debate that's going to be necessary because of the changes with the provincial government and how they're looking at their funding of projects. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, the cupboard is bare in the province, and it could very well end up being quite bare down in Ottawa as well with some of the debt loads they're carrying. So we are well positioned with the casino revenue, and quite frankly with the PDI revenues, we're going to be in pretty good shape as a community going forward.
Okay, and I do believe we're going to take a break, but I've got one quick question before we do go to break for each of you, and it could be a one-word answer, and it's related. Daryl, we'll start with you. What would be your favorite capital project going forward?
My favorite capital project going forward, roads, roads, and roads.
All right, Diane?
Yeah, Charlotte Street.
Roads and specific roads. Okay, so we have consensus there. On that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be back for the second segment of our live studio debate with the mayoral candidates for the City of Peterborough here on YourTV. So stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us for the mayoral debate for the City of Peterborough. We have both candidates in studio, Daryl Bennett and Diane Therrien. And when we left off on our last series of questions, the first question went to Daryl Bennett. We're going to go back to Diane Therrien, and we're going to talk about the economy and job creation. And the topic people love to talk about in Peterborough. It's come up a bit in your opening statements. The first question, Diane, to you. As mayor, what will be your vision or hopes for the soon-to-be vacant GE lands in the center of Peterborough?
I mean, my main hopes was that we can force GE to clean that up and make it into a usable space for our community, because that is prime land in the heart of our city, and there's limitless possibilities with what we could do with it. So it's going to require a lot of work to get them to follow through on what they need to do in terms of cleaning that up. And it's something that we need to look at. But in an ideal world, if that was done, then we could put an abundance of things there: housing, parks. It's close to schools, it's close to downtown, it's close to Lansdowne Place. You can have an employment lands there, part of it. You can have affordable housing. Again, I was talking about mixed use zoning, mixed use developments. That would be a prime example of where we could put that. And ultimately, I was at a World Town Planning Day the other year that talked about that, and a lot of young people came together to talk about what the potential vision for that could be. And so pulling in the ideas from the community as well to see what would be best in the best interest of the community in the long term is something that we would need to have a real conversation about, because that has been a legacy of Peterborough, and we need to make it a legacy going forward.
Okay, thanks, Diane. Daryl?
GE property, that's something that we jumped on as soon as we heard about the announcement of the closure, and it's unfortunate for the families that are involved in that, but certainly it's part of what's been going on with the industrial base in this country for some time. GE is still a good corporate citizen. GE has indicated that they're willing to bring the property up to whatever standard is required. They have a policy where they don't sell their lands. They will lease them, they will work with people who are interested in working with those properties, but at this point they're not interested in selling it. So we reached out to them immediately. We've been in touch with them. There are some corporate bodies who are showing an interest in most of the property in one case, and a good portion of the property in another. BWXT, of course, owns the nuclear side of it. They've leased that from GE on with an extension of 20-year lease on that property, so they're well situated in the community for long term. I see more commercial and or industrial type activities going on there in the future, and that's something we need to work with GE to ensure that we all work this through to everybody's best advantage. It's possible with the outlying lands that they may do something with them but not the actual factory buildings themselves. Some of those are actually got some historical components to them that need to be preserved.
Okay. All right, thank you very much on that. Now we're going to take a break from the job creation questions, and this is the special part of our debate. We're going to allow a candidate to ask a question of the candidate. It can be on any topic, and Diane, we're going to go to you first, and you get to ask Daryl Bennett a question that
Wonderful.
you'd like an answer to and share with our audience.
Sure. So, Daryl, you continue to say that our federal masters will not commit to funding housing development through the $40 billion National Housing Strategy until after the next election. But the CMHC has made 2 presentations in Peterborough actively encouraging applications to the co-investment fund, which has been open since May of this year.
Correct.
Your vision for housing over the past 8 years has not addressed the current housing crisis, which is felt by residents of all ages and most income levels. If re-elected, how would you change your approach to the federal government to ensure that we do benefit from this funding?
Well, that's a good question, and it's one that we have considered. We have staff actually who've looked at the money availability. It's been indicated that it will be flowing more freely after the next election. It's a partnership that they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who has a block of land that you can build on. Number one, we don't have the land, so we've got to go to a private partner to ensure that we have the land base to work with, which brings them into the mix on the actual application process. We have not had anybody step forward to engage in it at this point. That's something that we will look at, trying to create a partnership that has some functionality to it. The difficulty is it doesn't save people a lot of money from an operational standpoint when you bring in a third party to it. So from a city standpoint, we're still going to get tagged with some extra costs for the taxpayer by becoming engaged in it, because we don't have the land to put into the mix, which is the normal sort of partnership that's looked for. So going forward, we'll take advantage of whatever money is made available to us. It'll be monies that are well thought through and well planned for as far as getting the best use of that on behalf of our taxpayer.
Diane, are you satisfied with that answer?
Well, I think that there could have been done in the interim in terms of having the mayor attend those presentations and show some leadership on wanting to move that forward. But
Okay, Daryl, you were mentioned. You're welcome to rebut that comment if you like.
The mayor was well versed in what the presentations were about, and certainly we are fully aware of what the program has to offer. As I just explained, we're not in a position to take full advantage of it as some other communities might be, because we don't have the land mass to contribute.
Great. Thank you for that, and we will have an opportunity for Daryl Bennett to ask a question of Diane Therrien in our next segment. Now let's get back to, and it's gonna be like we know our audience can keep up. We went from the housing, we're going back to job creation.
And then you'll move to cannabis, and then we can all keep
That's
up.
There you
right.
go.
We will get to cannabis. Don't worry. This goes to Daryl Bennett. Daryl, what do you see as the most important economic drivers for the city of Peterborough, and what would a council led by you do to support them? So what do you see as our future drivers of our local economy?
One of the big ones and that's a good question, Jay, and it's one you're quite familiar with actually, and that's our airport. We have made a considerable investment in the airport over the last decade to ensure that we're built for the future. As people will know, Toronto International Airport will only be in a position to handle passenger traffic going forward. All the repair facilities are there. Over the next 2 decades, we'll look for new locations within Ontario, I hope. And certainly Peterborough is well positioned. We have probably the second or third best airport for people to relocate to from the repair, the rebuild standpoint for air avionics products. And that's something that we have been diligently working towards for the last decade, and we'll continue to do that. We have 2 corporate bodies now who have been showing a keen interest in the community because of the airport, because of its location in this part of Ontario, and because of its proximity to their markets, which is very close by. So we are well positioned from the airport standpoint. The second one that works just as well is the Clean Tech Commons and Business Park out at Trent University, and certainly Adam Noble has a product that is going to revolutionize food production, in my estimation, in the world. And he has some great plans going forward, and that's one that we were very keen on initially, and we've invested a good deal of money in it to ensure that it's going to be satisfactorily done for us.
Thank you. Diane, same question to you. What do you see as the most important economic drivers for the city of Peterborough, and what would the council led by you do to support them?
And yes, thank you for the question. Certainly, as Daryl mentioned, the airport is a big economic driver. There is a labor shortage in all of the fields that are required out there at the airport. So working to encourage students to get into those fields is very important. We need to be working with Trent and Fleming to encourage students coming out to try to start up businesses here. We know that 90% of job growth in Peterborough is in small and medium-sized businesses. And there are opportunities for, I believe, creative and adaptive reuse of some of the buildings that we have around the downtown and outlying areas that could be repurposed and turned into some of those facilities. So consulting companies, for example, or other small businesses that don't need an industrial warehouse but need just a space to be in. So where the Good Life on Charlotte Street used to be would be, you know, a big enough place to hold some of the businesses that I've talked to that are looking, you know, the 20 to 40 employees that people are looking to start up. And that's where the vast majority of the job growth is in our community. We know that people want to come here because of our quality of life. I meet them at the door every day. Some people are working remotely for companies in Durham and GTA and overseas. Some of them are commuting, but some of them are looking at, well, how can I bring my business here? Where can I go? And we talk about industrial lands a lot, but there's also ways to look at creative and adaptive reuse of pre-existing buildings that are already on serviced areas in our city and serviced lands.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Diane, this question will continue with job creation in the economy, and this will come to you first. What would be your advice as mayor to a young person hoping to secure a good paying job in Peterborough? What would be your advice, speaking one-on-one to a constituent, about what they should be doing to succeed and find employment here?
Absolutely. And when I was working at Trent a couple years ago, I went through this a few times with students who would come and ask and, you know, say they wanted to go into a certain field, and it was like, well, you know, have you looked at the prospects in that field? Because maybe they're not so great. So we know where some of the shortages are. They're in the skilled trades. They're in, as I said, aviation, nursing. We have an aging population here, a lot of people that need to get into PSW and those types of work. So talking to people about that, but also there's a really strong culture of entrepreneurship in Peterborough and of startups, and the Innovation Cluster has done great work around that to try to encourage these young people to develop their ideas and bring them to fruition. So, you know, you can't force somebody to do what they don't want to do, but laying out some of the opportunities because they're different than they were even 10 or 20 years ago. You know, when I talk to students now that, you know, they really want to go into sociology, it's like, okay, well, you have to understand that that's less of a profession than it was in the past. And so here are some of the other things that you might be able to do with that. But I think having those conversations is really important, and there needs to be a broader discussion around where the job needs are and projecting out forward to where the job trends are going to be in 10 and 20 years. And we can do that by looking at the population that we have, the growth that's happening, you know, the students that we have, as Clean Tech Commons was mentioned, you know, the environmental studies and science students that are coming out of both Trent and Fleming are amazing, and we need to be working to try to keep them here and hopefully getting them a place at Clean Tech Commons.
Great. Thank you very much. Daryl, same question to you. What would be your advice as mayor to young people hoping to secure a good paying job in Peterborough?
Well, Jay, there's all sorts of opportunities that are coming forward over this next decade. I call it the white tsunami that's out there, and it's the gray-haired people who are retiring in this community in the next decade or two that are going to leave some very good jobs available to young people. So we are well positioned. Again, the previous MPP, Jeff Leal, was instrumental in getting us the Kawartha Skilled Trade Centre, and I've been encouraging people to look very seriously at some skilled trades to assist us, number one, as a community, but number two, with their own prospects going forward. A lot of those trades can be spun off into new business opportunities, and if they have that entrepreneurial spirit, as a lot of them do, they can then build into a career in that, which is what a lot of people have done in the past when they get to be an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter, and they get into the actual building business themselves. So there's lots of opportunities in that field and many others. As you know, I've been in business for 50 years in this community, so I've got lots of experiences in the starting of businesses and the running of businesses, and certainly people talk to me on a regular basis about what they could do with some money that they've got available to invest or a new idea that's coming forward. And some of that mentorship is available through the Innovation Cluster and through other mentors that are in the community. Through Community Futures is another one that helps people get started up. So there's lots of opportunities. We have lots of good ideas. I just was involved in a few of them at the Innovation Cluster as late as Thursday of this week. So there's people who are looking to partner and people who are looking for mentors just to assist them with getting the best foot forward and getting a good idea of how they're going to move forward with an idea to make sure they don't get burned through the process. And we have some wonderful people that they're working with in the community.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both for answering that series of questions. We're going to move on to another topic that's been on the airwaves on YourTV and its predecessor for years. It's police services. And I want to ask a couple of questions of each of the candidates. We'll go to Daryl first, followed by Diane. Daryl, are you satisfied with the services provided by the Peterborough-Lakefield Police Services Board and the role the city plays in governance of the police services today? And I think most people know watching this show, we've been through a bit of turmoil there, but as far as what's happening today, give us your opinion on whether you as mayor would continue as is or find other ways to improve it.
Jay, good question, and certainly the key word to that is today. And today we have a great working relationship with our new police chief and with the service that's in operation in the city of Peterborough. We started down the road a couple of years back when we get into offering contract services to outlying areas. I see that as being a growth field for us with the proper people in place. I believe this new chief is well versed with that. He's certainly very attuned to what's going on in this community, and that's a real breath of fresh air from an operational standpoint. So the key word was today. So today, yes, I'm very satisfied with the way it's operating. I'm very pleased with the new chief that we've selected, and the outcome has been great thus far. We're looking forward to his 90-day report to give us a bit of a handle as to where he thinks we'll be going shortly in the future and how that's going to relate to the needs of this community going forward.
Great, thank you. And Diane, for the last 4 years, you've been on council and observed the things happening with the Police Services Board. And as Daryl mentioned, the recent hiring of a new police chief. What are your thoughts on the services and the oversight provided by Peterborough Police Services and the role the city plays in governing them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a good one. And throughout that period of turmoil that you mentioned, I continued to maintain good relationships with the former chief and deputy chief, as well as rank and file members of the police services. I met with the new chief yesterday morning to talk about issues of interest to us in the community, and so have a good working relationship with him too. I think he does bring some new perspectives and different ideas on how things can be run, and so we need to continue to rebuild that relationship. Just because we have a new chief doesn't mean that there isn't still relationships that need to be rebuilt down through the deputy and down to the rank and file members who were put through a lot in the last couple of years. And I've been open and communicating with them on an ongoing basis about that. And so commit to working with them for the next however long we need to.
All right, thank you. Now, I'm going to stay on that theme for a minute, and this has to do, one of the issues that we had that was a bit of a contentious issue with the Police Services Board was, and Diane will come to you on this, was the cost of police servicing in Peterborough. I think everybody agrees that we need good policing, we need to contribute to it, but how would you lead council to ensure that rising costs balance with ratepayers' service expectations and the ability to pay?
Yes, thank you for the question. We know that often with these budgets, a large part of it is operational, is salaries, and so there's little that you can do with that. We also know that with the way that the Provincial Police Act works, that we're kind of bound by that. Now they're making changes to modernize that, which is great. And I think with the new police chief coming in, he's got some creative ideas on how they can work a little bit smarter, work a little bit more efficiently, and hopefully that will save some money over the long term too, and in the short term. But I mean, a lot of those officers are working with quite outdated equipment. I've been on ride-alongs, so I've seen the equipment that they're using, and the work that they do is tireless. And so we need to make sure that they have the right tools to do the job, particularly when we're expecting more and more of them. And we'd love to see those foot patrols coming back downtown. And again, all of these things cost money.
Okay. Daryl, what are your thoughts on how to ensure that rising costs balance with ratepayers' expectations of service delivery?
That's a great question, Jane. It's one that we have grappled with over the years, as people will well know. I think, first of all, we start with the knowledge that the crime rate in this country, and certainly in this city, has been dropping considerably over the years. So the stylization of crime has changed, and the volume of crime has changed. The new chief very quickly analyzed what we had by way of manpower, and he said he wants to take a long, hard look at the redeployment of staff. Some of the programs that have been built into the system are, in my estimation, a bit outdated. I think we have adequate equipment for everybody. We certainly just need to redeploy some of that staff. As was mentioned, about 90% of the actual costs of policing go to wages. So the reuse of and repurposing of the people that are involved in that is going to be very important to make sure that we get the best value for our services going forward. We do not need social work people with guns, quite frankly, so we need to free up the police office to do the job of policing when they're called upon, but also to do some preventative work as well, and that's something the new chief is showing a keen interest in.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to continue on that theme, and it does have to do with the service delivery of police services. We hear that downtown Peterborough is safe. That's been expressed by the new police chief. That concerns about crimes may be perceptions only, that people shouldn't worry. But I do believe many citizens have serious concerns about what they do see, what they do read about, and there's typically 3 headlines a day about something that's happened downtown. And this question will go to I believe Daryl first. Do you adhere to this attitude, or would you support any initiatives to make people feel safer downtown? What can be done to make that happen?
Well, thank you, Jay. And again, that's a good question. It's one that I attempted to start the process with last week when I made an announcement on changes that need to occur with our downtown safety issues and safety-related issues. This community, like many, many others across North America, has drug-related problem activities, and that's something that we can get a handle on if we go at it appropriately and work instead of with silo activity, but work in a collaborative way to bring all the departments that are out there to assist people, bring them all together. It starts with a catalyst, and that catalyst is the police. They identify the problem, they know the players, they can start then to start the process of getting help to those people who are best in need of it. I used the phrase enough is enough when I was going through the speech process, and that came from a gentleman who approached me as mayor on behalf of everybody else out there as taxpayers and said, "You have a problem." I said, "What's our problem?" "I no longer have a place to stay." I said, "Oh, I talked to you about 8 months ago. You were living in a house then." "I was." "What happened?" "I had a decision to make. I could either pay my drug dealer or I could pay my rent." So I chose to pay my drug dealer. But he said, "Now you have to fix that for me." That's him telling me that the taxpayers of this community need to make up for a mistake that he has made, and that was quite offensive from an operational standpoint. Yes, he has problems, and yes, we will deal with those problems, but we're not going to make those problems put those problems on everybody else's back.
Okay. Thanks, Daryl. Diane, same question. We hear but downtown is safe from some camps. The concerns are perceptions. People shouldn't worry. Do you adhere to that attitude, or would you support initiative to make people feel safer downtown?
I think fundamentally, yes, we want to make people feel safe in the city that they live in. I am somebody who lives and works downtown, and I understand that there's certain people downtown, and generally there's about a half a dozen people who are visibly on drugs or going through mental health issues that, again, which is when we bring back the Foot Patrol as well as the One City program that was happening this summer, which had outreach workers who were able to identify the people that were in crisis and direct them to the appropriate services. That is the kind of holistic approach that we need to be taking, because it's not any less safe than any other area of Peterborough. It's simply that because there is a visible concentration of poverty, of mental health, and of addictions, that certainly it can feel unsafe. And I understand that, and as a town ward councillor, I hear about that all the time. And so we do need to be working with our partners, with the police, with public health, with PARN, with all the community groups that have been doing this frontline social service work for a long time to be able to get people the help that they need. And like I've been saying, addictions and mental health and poverty and homelessness are all interrelated issues, and they need to be treated in a comprehensive way. And in my perspective is that having as many methadone clinics downtown as we have is simply a band-aid solution. I would be looking to the provincial and federal levels of government to help step up and fund a proper comprehensive detox center where people can get the proper services that they need to get them back on their feet and get them off the street and to where they need to be. So that's access to counseling and employment supports and housing supports and all of those other things, because these are our people and we need to treat them as such.
Great, thank you, Diane. And I must say that was the first time we've heard that bell in the second half.
Yeah, so. Very good.
but you were done your answer. My last question really was to talk, just reference the fact that as Peterborough grows, the GTA grows, And with improved transportation, new highways, rail service, bus service, big city problems such as drugs and violence are coming into Peterborough. And the question was going to be, what can City Council do specifically to address this type of issue? And Diane, I think you answered that, but I'll give you a chance to be more specific on that, and then I'll go to Daryl just for to wrap up this this segment.
So what can City Council do
Yeah,
to...
what can City Council do? What would be your priority, knowing that we have homegrown issues, but some may be coming in from other places?
Absolutely. And when I met with the police chief yesterday, he was talking about how he knows that there are some criminal elements coming in from Toronto to sell drugs because they'll go to where the market is. And so Peterborough also is a social service hub for the outlying rural areas in Peterborough County where people can't access the same services that we have here. And they are concentrated in the downtown, which is what leads to that visibility of poverty and mental health, and which makes people feel unsafe. And so again, we need to have a collaborative approach between, you know, Peterborough does have a drug strategy group that meets regularly with all of those groups and with the police, and there's city members there too. So we need to continue to do that, but we also need to be lobbying again the province to change the funding models, I believe, away from methadone clinics and towards a comprehensive detox center where people can get the supports that they need to get back on their feet, because methadone clinics do not provide that. They're a for-profit model, they're a Band-Aid model, and they're not getting to the root of the problem of why people are dealing with these mental health and addictions problems in the first place.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. Daryl, I'll let you finish off on that
And
question.
City Council has been working appropriately with the police department to assist with their needs for the last number of years, and certainly we will continue to do that. The drug situation, the problems that face the downtown community are deep and vast, and certainly it's not going to be an easy thing to clean up, but we have to start somewhere. That's what I brought forward by way of proposal. It's time that we took a stance and brought people together to ensure that we're getting results on behalf of our taxpayers, to make sure that we are going to make the community a safer place for all of us to be and a better place for all of us to be long term. It can be done. It's going to take the province perhaps to even change some laws that are out there that don't give us the tools that we need to directly assist. We have some drug activity that's going on in the city, where there's 102 opioid deaths in this community from drugs that were not what people thought they were. The dealers know who their customers are, and yet they're still selling them product that is flawed. So a change in the overall provincial structure of laws to ensure that we're going to get some teeth put into those. That's a manslaughter charge as far as I'm concerned, and I'd like to see some action taken in that regard.
Great. Thank you very much.
Can I just add to that, that it's also, we know that this is a problem that isn't just impacting low-income people. We're seeing more and more that these overdoses, these deaths are happening to people of all income brackets, of all ages, some of whom are just using recreational drugs and don't know what's in them. And so getting to the root of that is really important too, and that's going to be a hard road, but we need to do it before it gets worse.
Great, thank you. And we will talk about the legalization of cannabis in our next segment, which we'll get to after. I have one question I'm going to ask each of you. It's based on a similar theme. The questions are different because it's related to your past positions on this particular topic. And I'm going to start off with Daryl, and it's a transportation question. It's something that the YourTV studios echo with this word for the last 5-6 years, the parkway. Daryl, why does Peterborough need the parkway?
Well, Jay, have you driven around our city lately?
I'm asking the questions.
I think there were a number of folks out there who were very clear about the need for the parkway, and I don't think that we can deny the fact that over the last 71 years that every transportation study that's been done in the city has included a parkway some parkway corridor activity. The proposal we last brought forward was putting an arterial street in the parkway corridor. That one made the most sense of any that I've heard over the years. We dotted all the I's, we dotted all the T's, and we ensured that we were in good position to submit that to the province. The province denied it, not on the basis of the EA support that we had sent in, or report that we'd sent in, but on the basis they didn't feel we had adequate input from interested parties. So I think that's something that the new government will be prepared to look at. Is there a need? Is there traffic congestion in this city? It's only just got started. When 407 arrives, when the new 28 houses, 100 houses in the north end of the city, the 700 houses in the east side of the city, and the other 12,000 lots that are out there that are slated for development, we are going to need traffic solutions, and the Parkway Corridor represents that best solution, in my opinion.
Great, thank you, Daryl. And somewhat similar question, Diane, but specifically for you, why doesn't Peterborough need the parkway?
Part of me wishes they just built it 60 years ago and we didn't have to still be arguing about it all the time.
You're in favor of it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, 60 years ago. City planning has changed significantly since then. And I think at this point in time, while there are areas around there that we certainly need to work on, that both not just environmentally but also economically, it's something that we can't afford in terms of if we want to keep taxes down. Because I hear about that at the door every day too, people's taxes are high. Well, if we're going to try to build this project, it's going to be twice the cost it was projected in 2012. We know how costs of construction prices go up. And again, even if the province were to come around tomorrow and say, sure, go ahead, it's still going to take another 5 years to get going on it. And my position is that in the 8 years in the interim, we've done nothing to try to alleviate cut-through traffic on residential streets, to try to lower speed limits on these residential streets so that families can feel safe and enjoy their homes. So that's where I'm at. I think that if we're building, if we're talking about the 407 to the west and we're talking about Lily Lake to the north, that we need to be looking at the Western Bypass Road, working with the county to upgrade Lily Lake to a proper standard out Atkinson and Brayley, because a lot of the people that I've met that are living up in that north end are commuting out that way, and that's the way that they go now, and that's the way that they will continue to go.
Okay.
And Jay, if I may,
sure, Daryl.
the parkway issue is one that deserves the amount of attention that it does need to make sure people are worth understanding. The last projected cost that we had on the parkway as a 2-lane arterial street in that corridor was going to run about $80 million. That was in 2014 dollars. The Band-Aid solutions that we'd need to put in to supplement other intersections, other roads, other changes that need to be made in the infrastructure were going to be $109 million. We have to do something to alleviate the traffic. We just can't sit and wait for the government to say, oh, it's okay to fix this intersection or that intersection. We can't even do that now. There was a number of people on council. Councillor Therrien was one of them, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Real, and Councillor Pappas sent a letter to the former minister, Minister Leal, asking him to intervene and assure that the parkway process as planned would not be approved. That was unfortunate for the community after spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 or $6 million on doing an EA study, which was perfectly done by the own minister's staff, who recommended to the minister, and then it got turned down because of political reasons. That's wrong on behalf of this community. The south link of the parkway is a no-brainer. That one from Medical Drive down to Clonsell Avenue should be done. It should be done immediately. We can't even do that because of the way the EA was turned down. So to say that we're not doing anything, we are limited in what we can do. We've timed the lights out properly. We put some changing lanes as far as turning lanes in and things of that nature. We've done what we could do. We're limited though in doing a solution to it because of the EA being turned down.
Thank you. Diane, you have a chance to rebut.
Sure,
that.
I would say that southern part between Sherbrooke and Clonsilla should have been done first, because then it wouldn't be this piecemeal approach that we've seen being taken to this project. And again, it was put off for decades and decades, and there were reasons for that. And so, city planners that were planning back in 1947, back in the 50s, those planners are not. Those plans are irrelevant now. They don't make sense in a 21st century capacity where we have rapid changes in transportation and transit in the way that we get around. And so if we're thinking in the long-term planning, both for an environmental sense and also for how traffic is going to flow going forward, even 5 years is too long to wait to get any movement on that one bridge that's supposed to solve all of our problems, which is also projected to increase traffic in the south end.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank you both for completing the second segment of our debate here on YourTV. I want to ask our audience to stay with us. We'll be coming back for our final segment. We will get on to cannabis and some other items.
We'll talk about it, not get on to it.
That's
Come
right,
on,
good
Jay.
point. I gotta be careful with what I say.
That'd make it interesting.
I've got to wait for a few more days before you could do it legally, yes. So stay with us. We'll be right back on YourTV. Welcome back to Behind the Ballot here on YourTV. We have two mayoral candidates running for the position in the city of Peterborough. In studio, Daryl Bennett and Diane Therrien. And we have some questions to get through before we get to the closing remarks. Before we continue on with my list of questions, we're going to give candidate Daryl Bennett an opportunity to ask a question of Diane Therrien. So Daryl, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Diane, for being available to have a question asked, and it's a great format for it. You mentioned that you've been going door to door, and you mentioned that people do talk to you about taxes in the city of Peterborough, and certainly they talk to me about it. We have been at most of the doors in the city with either personally or with our campaign team, and one thing that has come up for discussions, and it's one that I have been keen on over the last 8 years, and that's the question that says that people ask about how taxes are arrived at. And it's not the results of it, but what's the formula? So we used to have a mill rate that was available to us. That changed to tax levy, and then they've actually taken that and broken it down into classification. So what's the formula for the determination of residential tax in the city of Peterborough when it comes to relating to tax levy?
So you're talking about the impact assessment that helps determine what a house is valued at?
No, it's
that
the formula that is used by city staff to formulate the actual cost of a person's taxes in relation to the impact valuation. What's that formula?
That formula. Well, that's interesting because I do hear about taxes all the time as well. And we know that taxes are coming from what MPAC is valuing houses at, and that staff work diligently to make sure that we're holding them to the guidelines that we provide to them. And so we have, between our residential, commercial, industrial, and other tax rates, a variety of different percentages that have been arrived at. Mm-hmm. And staff do that diligently every year to work on that and to figure out what, the best way about that is. And they break it down, as we know, in what the residential taxpayer pays. It's easy for people to see where their money is going and how it's being spent.
But in fairness, the question was, what's the formula for the determination of that? And it's one that I took an interest in when I was first elected 8 years ago, and it was one that I still dwell on when I see staff trying to come back to us with the numbers that we've established for them. The formula is quite simple, actually. It's you take the tax levy, which is the amount of money that the city sets aside each year on its annual operating budget. For 2018, it's $127 million. And then you simply divide that by the total assessment roll that's provided by impact. And in Peterborough, I think in 2018, it was about $10,300,000 and some odd thousand dollars. And what that relates to then is if we don't add new product to the mix, of that assessment base doesn't rise, but the costs continue to go up on an annualized basis, that drives taxes up for people in the city. So that's why it's so important for us to look at the growth aspect of what's going on in the community.
And I've talked about, my support for growth as long as it's done in a good way and in a forward-thinking way. And we know that we need to bring back particularly industrial tax class, which is one of the big ones that we have here. We rely a lot on the residential taxpayers, and we hear about it frequently, that people are worried about being priced out of their homes because of how that is rolling out. People have paid off their homes, seniors that I talk to, that their taxes are still going up and that have gone up over 30% over the last 8 years. And that is something that is hard to hear because they have nowhere to go.
The actual number is 24% over the last 8 years. Inflation itself has been 18% of that, and we've added into that 24% as 1% a year for capital costs. You touched on the industrial side of it. If you're going to be competitive in Ontario to attract new industries, and there are some out there, one of the first questions to ask is what's the tax rating for industry as opposed to other land uses in your community. We were way out of whack with the rest of Ontario for a number of years. We brought ourselves almost to the center of the pact again, which is where we should be. And certainly I would encourage us to stay there for the long term. That's going to attract new businesses. It's going to give people the opportunity to supply new jobs for the community. So it's a very important issue, and it's one that I certainly have taken an interest in, and staff pays very close attention to it.
And absolutely, I agree with the industrial tax class and bringing those guys back.
All right, thank you very much. On that note, we will move, because we've promised our audience we're going to talk about the legalization of cannabis and the impact on the community and how the city of Peterborough will deal with it. So I want to get to that before we do run out of time. The consumption of cannabis or marijuana or products of marijuana will soon be legal in Canada. And Daryl, this is coming to you first. What's your position on how the city of Peterborough should deal with the sale and use of marijuana and related products in the community? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is a suggestion that some municipalities have banned smoking of tobacco in any public area, including streets and parks. Should Peterborough have a bylaw to further restrict smoking in public that would also align with the potential use of cannabis as a smoking product?
The cannabis changes to the law are certainly going to be one that's going to take some very careful consideration going forward. We're very thankful that the province has put in place a mail order delivery service for the first number of months to give us time to try to get our heads around how best we can deal with it. There's a $40 million fund that's being established to assist with the policing side of costs as it would relate directly to cannabis. That, if you translate it to the population base in Ontario, works out that Peterborough might get $10,000 to help offset some of the policing costs, which have been guesstimated to be $500,000 just to get set up to be able to try to monitor it going forward. So on top of that, you've got all the security problems that flow from it as well, plus the smoking side of it. For years, we've been convincing people that smoking's bad for your health, and now we have smoking being reintroduced to the younger people, which I find to be very appalling, quite frankly. So lots of consideration. There's going to be lots of meetings going on between now and April. Should we opt out? I don't think that is good for any of us, operationally speaking. We've got neighboring communities that probably won't opt out, and that leaves us a sitting duck for all the problems that are going to flow from it without any of the revenues coming in. So it's something we will carefully monitor going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Daryl. Diane, if you were to become mayor, how would you deal with this issue of cannabis becoming legal and smoking in general? Now, mind you, cannabis will come in many forms, but we're focused on the
Exactly.
lighting up portion.
We've been asked this question at a few debates and had fairly
Get them to tell you what forms.
fairly similar answers, but
Just heard rumors.
certainly at this point I would not be prepared to opt out. I think that we need to work with public health, with our Peterborough Police, to make sure that we can figure out how to do this in the best possible way. There are economic spin-offs if you are going to have some of that industry coming to town. I know that when I was at Trent, I had grad students who got hired right out of their master's degree to go work for a firm down in Ancaster that was doubling its productivity, and that, and they were getting paid full-time jobs with benefits, and that's something that's sorely lacking in this town. So we need to be evaluating the merits of doing it versus not doing it, but we don't want to pass up on any economic revenue, nor the possibility of being sort of at the forefront of some of the stuff that's being done around this, but certainly making sure that it's kept out of the hands of young people, because that's going to be a problem. It always is. It would have been great to have more time and more money to figure out how to facilitate this. I know that in my meeting with the police chief, they're concerned about the cost it takes for officers to be trained to figure out whether people are driving intoxicated. And so there's a lot of things that have been done quite quickly without, I think, the through thought about the impacts they're going to have on municipalities. And as we know, that often happens. Decisions are made at higher levels of government, and municipalities are left to figure out how to deal with them, and we're the least equipped to do it in terms of finances.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to another hot topic in this community over the last several years. The sale of and Daryl, this question will come to you initially. The sale of the publicly owned Peterborough Distribution Inc., or PDI, is before the Ontario Energy Board for final approval. Will this sale of this currently, but will be former publicly owned entity have a positive or negative impact on the delivery of electricity in the community, and where will the proceeds from the sale, estimated to be about $55 million, be directed under your leadership if elected mayor?
Thanks, Jane. That's a very good question. It's one that doesn't get asked much, quite frankly, but it's one that needs some clarification on. To start with, yes, the delivery of hydro services in the community will be enhanced, operationally speaking, but also cost-wise for our community. We were looking as PDI owners, PDI being the distribution side of the business, about a 28.8% increase in costs over the next 10 years, and that's after the city was going to be asked as shareholder to invest a considerable amount of money back into the business to bring it back up to some of the new standards that are being established throughout the country. So with the deal with H1, we've frozen the rate. We've reduced it by 1%, frozen it for 5 years, looking at an inflationary rate after the 5 years up to 10 of about 6.5%. OEB has made it very clear that they want some indication of what the rates will be after that. Hydro has already indicated that they will look at an inflationary side from a costing standpoint going forward, so we'll get that as part of the overall approval process. It hasn't made it to OEB yet. There's a lot of work to put all the documents together and to ensure that they're done appropriately. Along with the actual sale itself, which will generate $55 million, which I believe should be invested back into renewable energy sources, and the government stopped a lot of the projects that they had on the books, but they're going to reintroduce new projects coming forward, and we're certainly anxious to take advantage of those. When I first started with Kofi back in 2010, we were generating a very small amount of money from the generation side of the business. It now has taken over and is supplying the bulk of the $8 million or $9 million a year that we earn from that business is coming from generation. What we will do is then use that money to further capital cost reductions on your taxes or to enhance some of the capital projects that are outstanding in the community. Okay. With one other proviso, and that is, if I may, and I did hear the bell, but we also, along with that, we get a regional hub in this area. And those are high-paying jobs that are going to be sustained. Number one, the PDI employment will be enhanced through that prospect. The existing H1 jobs will stay in the community, and the new regional hub jobs will be added to the mix in the community. It's a great venture for us as a community.
Okay, thank you, Darrell. And I may have gone out of turn when I asked that question, but I'll give you two next time, Diane. Diane, could you answer that question? Will this proposed sale in progress, have a positive or negative impact on the delivery of electricity in the community? And where would you direct the sale proceeds if elected mayor?
Thank you for that question. And as you know, I voted against the sale of PDI. I also, during that process, urged council to consider other possible options. In particular, Viridian was very interested in talking to us. They are a smaller utility based down in sort of the Ajax-Whitby area, who have been working on mergers with other municipalities to ensure that those municipalities and their local distribution systems remain under some semblance of local control. And they met with me several times, and I asked council about the possibility of at least entertaining a conversation with them, and that was shut down. We were told that a deal with Hydro One was the only way to do it. So I do think that council did not do its proper due diligence in looking at the other options that we might have had if we were going to be forced to sell. I think that in the long term, I've heard concerns from residents who are on Hydro One currently and from people who work at the utility about the different standard of service that you get between the two. Hydro One, my understanding is that it's up to 48 hours to help to deal with any outage. We know that Peterborough Utilities has been much quicker than that generally, and so I do remain concerned about that. I don't know that we'll be having better service. Certainly some of the things that we've heard from Hydro One customers in other areas doesn't bode well for what's going to be happening here. But again, you know, if this is going to go through, you need to make the best out of a situation you didn't necessarily want, and indeed using those funds and reinvesting them in smart ways into renewable energies, into making sure that our water generation is up to par, because people are concerned about that. I've been asked about that a lot lately too. Are we going to sell off our water next?
Okay, thank you.
Jay, if I may, it is a very important issue to the community, and one thing that was touched on is the level of services from H1. The level of services are established by OEB, and the service levels for Hydro One exceed PDI in most cases on an annualized basis. Their level of services are very commendable. We have a good service rating in the city. H1's is better than what ours is.
Okay. Diane, do you want a final comment on PDI sale?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on, and Diane, this question will come to you. It's going to be a two-part question, so I'll have I may get the dinger when I ask my question, and I'll try to keep it quick.
Good luck.
It's to do with municipal governance.
Sure.
And something both of you are very familiar with over the last 4 years and beyond. The last term of council, there's been adjustments to both the administration of City Hall and to council meetings. And the question I have, two of them. Are you supportive of the commissioner versus director's approach to staff leadership? How is it helping the city to do business more effectively and efficiently? And related to that are some changes to new regulations for speakers, limiting presentation times, and requesting delegations to register to speak to council in advance. Is this system working in your opinion? Are ratepayers afforded enough opportunities to express their opinions on issues? So the changes with the staff levels to, I guess, streamline it, you got rid of a director. Is that working? And the second has to do with the administration of the actual meeting. So Diane, give us your thoughts on that.
Yes, so it's interesting, the reorg that happened, on paper sounds good. The problem that I heard from some of the staff that were not involved in that is that they were sort of left wondering what was going on. And so, a month after it had come to council, people were still unsure if they were being shifted departments, if they were being shifted somewhere else, and there wasn't, in my estimation, proper communication down the chain to what the repercussions would be for all of staff, because you're focusing on those senior directors and commissioners now, but you need to remember that City Hall is a big organization and there's a lot of people working under that need to make sure that their morale is up and that they feel that they're included in the decisions that are being made, or at least being told about them and not being left in the dark. And we have, one of our, what we had hoped to be a commissioner taking over that Wayne Jackson's position, who is leaving. So I think that it is causing some problems. Again, sounded good on paper, but I don't know that it was rolled out in the best way. In terms of the changes to council and delegations, there was a lot of debate about this when we brought it forward, and I understand, the rationale for wanting to try to get people to register. There were some people that said we shouldn't take anybody who's unregistered, and the thought was, well, no, if you come and watch a council meeting and something compels you to want to speak and you're not allowed, then that's not really truly democratic. And so we said, no, you should be allowed to speak even if you're unregistered, granted it is for a shorter amount of time. In terms of the council meeting structure these days, I'm not sure how well it is working. We had hoped that off week would be used for public engagement, and by and large that hasn't really been the case.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane. Daryl, I'll just précis the question. It has to do with the new administrative approach.
On the directors to commissioners, there was 5 directors. That's been reduced to 3 directors once we get through that process. I think all of council agreed, I think we were unanimous on it actually, that it was the right thing for us to do. The timing of it was precipitated by the announcement of 2 retirements, which allowed the process to go forward. It's a work in progress. We understand that. We're going to make some adjustments to the delivery of services that are going to be enhanced. We're going to have a vertical integration rather than going back and forth to get a project through City Hall. It will now go virtually up a ladder from start to finish. So if somebody wants to build a deck or wants to build a subdivision, we're going to have the right people in place to assist them with that. So once we get the right people in place, the commissioners then will become strategic thinkers. They will manage strategically their various departments to ensure that we're getting good value for the services that we're providing, that we're giving better service to our customers at the end of the day, and that's what we were attempting to do. Takes no fault away from anybody. Everybody was doing a great job. It just, the opportunity presented itself, and we saw the opportunity and took advantage of it. On the council side of it, again, that document is a living document. We've made some adjustments to it just before the council break this year. We'll continue to make adjustments to it to make sure that it works. What we're hearing from people is that they didn't have time to analyze all the information that was coming forward to us. We gave people an extra week to be able to do that, to ensure that they had an opportunity to ask all the questions that they needed to ask. And that was both council and members of the public, so that they could be well versed on the items that were coming in front of council. And I believe that is working. We're not getting the strength of galleries that we had way back on some of the topics. Mind you, we haven't had as many hot topic items lately, but certainly the opportunity is there for people to explore the answers before the meeting so they get a better handle on what's going on.
Great, thank you, and thank you both candidates. We've come to the end of our question portion of our debate, and I want to thank you both for your very candid and solid answers. And if we could, we'd have you back, but we do have time for closing remarks, closing comments, and in reverse order, Diane Therrien will give her 2-minute closing remarks, then we'll move to Daryl Bennett. Diane, the
Thank
floor
you.
is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting, and thanks to everybody for watching tonight. So like I said, prior to and during my term on council, I've worked in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. I understand how they work and how they need to work together. I know how the municipality works and how it works with the provincial and federal governments to ensure that we get funding for the projects that we need to see come to fruition. I've sat on council for 4 years, and I understand the challenges that we are facing, environmentally and economically. Seniors, young families, and students who are moving here with nowhere to go. So yes, we need to build, our population is growing, the 407 is coming, but we need to do it to the highest standards possible. This is what our community deserves. We need mixed-use development, and growth and change needs to happen in a smart way. I'm not here to rubber stamp developments. I will continue to ask, as I have as a councillor, how do we build better? How do we plan better? How do we ensure that we have adequate and affordable housing stock while ensuring that we protect green space, which is one of our most valuable assets? It is not always the easy way, but in times like this, it is absolutely the necessary way. We need to be planning for growth now and into the future. We need to make sure that we have more transparency and accountability at City Hall. And if elected, I will continue to come out to these events and be available to all. I fundamentally believe that that is also part of the role of an elected official. We need more transparency, as I've said, more careful planning, and more empathy for people in our community who are struggling, because there are more and more of them every day. So I ask for your vote, and I encourage you who are watching to reach out to me and talk to me about the expectations that you have for our city and for our council. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Daryl, for your closing remarks.
Well, Jay, certainly thanks to Cogeco, to YourTV for the work that they do in the community on a month-by-month basis. It's more than just election time that Cogeco is available to us, and thank you for hosting this evening, and thanks to our viewers who've been watching this evening. I hope that you've learned a bit about what goes on with the debate process, and also with matters of importance to the community. We've touched on a lot of important topics tonight. Operationally speaking, we need to be able to show leadership to make decisions in the best long-term interests of this community. We can't hide when decisions are tough. We can't step aside to allow other things to occur rather than making the decisions. We rely on our principles and our values along with our own life experiences to help guide us to the right conclusion that's best for this community. We need housing. 3,500 units recently approved, with more to come. I support growth in the private sector. You can see what we've done with the sports fields, the library, Parkhill, Ashburnham, Brayley, the airport expansion, water, wastewater, and many other projects designed to prepare us for our future as a community. There's more to do. There's always more to do. To support growth and job creation, we need to deal with existing traffic problems, and there are solutions out there. We need to take advantage of them. We need to keep the momentum going that we've had in this community, which has improved the quality of life. When I talk to people at the doors, they want stability. They're looking at their council to operate in a very civil manner to make sure that we get the right decisions that are going to give good benefit to this community long term. My record is clear on how I approach problem solving, on how I approach decision making for this community. So I'm asking people to give me a half hour of their time on Election Day, October 22nd. Vote Daryl Bennett for mayor.
Well, that brings us to the end of our debate. I want to thank both candidates and wish you all the well in the remaining days of the campaign. Be safe, and we look forward to having you as viewers and citizens of Peterborough and any other community where you're watching this to get out and vote on October 22nd. PeterboroughVotes.ca. You can vote online, you can vote at advanced polls, you can vote now, but most of you waited till you saw this debate. We know that before you made your choice. You've got two distinct choices here, and people that care about Peterborough. Come back to join us on October 22nd, election night. We'll have live coverage behind the ballots. Some familiar faces will be on. Sylvia Sutherland, Jeff Leal, Dave Smith, Dan McWilliams providing commentary, and we'll see which one of these two people will be your next mayor. And we'll also talk about what's happening at council, and looking forward to getting out the vote and talking to you next time. Thank you for joining us.